The twin suns of Xylo's prime beat down on the desolate expanse of the crimson wastes, turning the sand into a shimmering, hostile sea. Corporal Finn Rourke wiped the grit from his eyes, his standard-issue combat fatigues sticking to his back with sweat and grime. The battle for the Skysplitter Ridge had been a brutal, grinding affair between the human Colonial Defense Force and the forces of the Cthar Dominion, but it was finally over. For now, all that remained was the grim task of searching the battlefield for survivors. A duty Finn performed with a quiet, weary diligence that belied his 22 years. He moved through the carnage, his boots crunching on spent shell casings and the brittle bones of fallen warriors from both sides. The air was thick with the acrid tang of ozone from plasma weapons and the sickly sweet stench of death. He'd seen enough of it to know the difference between a body that was merely unconscious and one that was beyond help. His scanner, a small device strapped to his wrist, beeped a weak, intermittent signal from behind a dune of blackened sand. Hope, a fragile thing in this place, flickered in his chest. Cresting the dune, he saw her. She was slumped against a half-buried piece of wreckage, her form almost ethereal against the harsh backdrop. Her skin was a deep, regal purple, like twilight-given flesh, and her long white hair was matted with blood and sand, spilling over her shoulders like a silken waterfall. She wore the tattered remnants of what must have been an officer's uniform, its silver insignia dulled by dust. One of her slender arms was cradled protectively against her chest, while the other lay limp at her side. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but present. She was breathtakingly beautiful, even in her state of utter ruin, and Finn felt a jolt of something unfamiliar. A mix of awe and a desperate need to protect. He approached slowly, his rifle held low but ready. "Hey!" he called out, his voice rough from the dry air. "Can you hear me?" There was no response. He took another step closer, his focus entirely on her. He needed to see the extent of her injuries, to get her to the medevac point before she bled out in this godforsaken place. He knelt beside her, his shadow falling across her face. Up close, he could see the fine, almost opalescent quality of her skin, the delicate curve of her pointed ears. She looked so fragile, so out of place amidst the brutal machinery of war. Just as he reached out a hand to gently check her pulse, a low, guttural growl echoed from the wreckage behind her. Finn's head snapped up. From the shadows, a hulking Cthar warrior emerged, its carapace scarred and chipped, one of its 4 eyes milky white from an old wound. It was a scavenger, a battlefield ghoul looking for easy prey or salvage. It hadn't seen Finn yet. Its full attention was on the unconscious alien woman, its mandibles clicking hungrily. Finn's heart hammered against his ribs. He was a corporal, not a hero. He was trained for firefights, not for single combat against a monster twice his size. But the thought of this creature laying a claw on her filled him with a cold, white-hot fury. Without thinking, without a plan, he acted on pure instinct. He lunged forward, throwing himself bodily between the Cthar and the woman, his own body a shield. "Get down!" he yelled, though she couldn't hear him. The command was for himself, a desperate plea to his own body to be faster, stronger. The Cthar roared in surprise and anger, swinging a massive, bladed arm. Finn rolled to the side, the blade whistling past his ear and carving a deep furrow in the sand. He scrambled to his feet, drawing his sidearm. The pistol felt laughably small in his hand. He fired 3 quick shots. The first 2 sparked harmlessly off the creature's thick carapace. The third struck a joint in its leg, making it stumble with a pained shriek. It was enough of an opening. Finn charged again, not away, but towards it, using his smaller size to his advantage. He ducked under another wild swing and drove the butt of his pistol into the Cthar's remaining good eye. The creature howled, blinded and enraged, thrashing wildly. Finn used the chaos to grab the alien woman under her arms. She was lighter than he expected. He dragged her away from the thrashing beast, his muscles screaming in protest. He didn't stop until he'd put 50 yards between them and the wreckage. He collapsed beside her, gasping for breath, his hands trembling. He risked a glance back. The Cthar was still flailing, disoriented. Giving them precious time, he turned his attention back to her. Her breathing was even more labored now. A dark stain was spreading across her uniform on her left side. Plasma burn. He fumbled with his medkit, pulling out a coagulant spray and a pressure bandage. His hands, usually steady in a firefight, were clumsy with adrenaline and worry. As he worked to staunch the bleeding, her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of amethyst, deep and intelligent, and they locked onto his with an intensity that stole his breath. There was pain there and fear, but also a sharp, assessing intelligence. She saw his human face, his CDF uniform, and a flicker of something else crossed her features. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. She tried to speak, but only a weak cough came out. Finn shook his head, holding a finger to his lips. "Shoo, don't talk. You're hurt bad." He finished applying the bandage, his touch as gentle as he could manage. Her gaze never left his. She watched him with a mixture of confusion and a dawning, profound curiosity. When his fingers brushed against her bare skin while securing the bandage, she flinched, not in pain, but as if his touch was a physical shock. A faint, electric blue aura seemed to shimmer around her for just a second before vanishing. Her eyes widened further, and a soft, almost inaudible sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a word he understood, but the emotion in it was clear, wonder. Before he could process what he'd just seen, the distant whine of a dropship's engines cut through the air. Medevac. Finn let out a sigh of relief that was immediately followed by a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He was about to haul a high-ranking Kthar officer, one who might have critical intelligence, back to his own people. Protocol demanded he secure her as a prisoner of war. But looking at her, at the trust he saw forming in those violet eyes, he couldn't bring himself to bind her hands. He helped her sit up, supporting her weight against his side. She was surprisingly strong, leaning on him with a grace that suggested she was used to command, not dependence. "My name is Finn," he said, his voice low. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe." She studied his face for a long moment, then gave a single, slow nod. Her voice, when it finally came, was a whisper, melodic and strange, yet perfectly clear. "Lyra," she breathed. "My name is Lyra." The dropship landed in a cloud of red dust, its ramp lowering to reveal two grim-faced medics. They took one look at Lyra's uniform and their expressions hardened. "Kthar scum," one of them muttered, reaching for a set of mag cuffs. Finn stepped in front of her, blocking their path. "She's a patient, not a prisoner." "Not yet." His tone left no room for argument. The medics, recognizing the authority in his stance, reluctantly backed off, gesturing for him to bring her aboard. Inside the sterile, white belly of the ship, Lyra was placed on a medbay cot. A medic began running a scanner over her, his face growing more serious by the second. "This is a Class 4 plasma burn," he announced. "She's lost a lot of blood. We need to get her to the main base hospital, stat." As the ship lifted off, Finn stood by her side, watching the crimson desert shrink below. Lyra's hand found his, her cool fingers wrapping around his calloused ones with a surprising strength. Her eyes held his, that same look of wonder mixed with a new, fierce determination. "You saved me, Finn of Earth," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "Why?" He didn't have a good answer. He just shrugged, a small, awkward gesture. "Saw someone who needed help. That's all." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "On my world, a life debt is the most sacred bond. You have claimed mine." Finn felt a flush creep up his neck. He was just a soldier from a backwater colony, not some noble knight in a story. Before he could formulate a reply, the dropship shuddered violently. An alarm blared through the cabin. "We're being hailed," the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. It's a council flagship, the Star of Viridia. They're demanding we surrender our Kthar prisoner immediately." A cold dread settled in Finn's gut. The Galactic Council was the ultimate authority in this sector, a neutral body that oversaw the fragile peace between 100 warring species. Why would they care about a single wounded officer? The medics exchanged nervous glances. The lead medic activated the ship's external comm. "This is CDF Medevac 7. We have a critical patient en route to Base Hospital Gamma. We cannot comply." There was a pause, filled only by the hum of the engines and the frantic beeping of Lyra's monitors. Then, a new voice came over the comm, calm, cultured, and carrying an immense, terrifying weight of authority. "This is Vice President Valerius of the Galactic Council. You will surrender the Kthar female Lyra to my custody at once. She is not a prisoner of war. She is my daughter." The words hit Finn like a physical blow. He looked down at Lyra, whose face had gone utterly still, her violet eyes wide with a terror he hadn't seen before. The Vice President of the Galactic Council. Her father. The man who was supposed to be a paragon of peace and order was the patriarch of the very species they were fighting. The implications were staggering, dizzying. Was this whole war a lie? A family squabble played out on a galactic scale. Lyra's grip on his hand tightened to the point of pain. Her whispered words were filled with a desperate, pleading urgency. "Finn, please, don't let them take me back." The dropship's engines whined as it was caught in the tractor beam of the massive council vessel looming above them. Its sleek, silver hull a stark contrast to the brutal utilitarianism of the CDF ships. Finn stood there, a simple soldier caught in a web of political intrigue he couldn't begin to comprehend, holding the hand of a purple-skinned princess whose very existence threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about the war. He looked from Lyra's terrified face to the armed medics, then back to the viewport where the star of Viridia hung in the sky like a judgment from the gods. His mind raced. He had followed orders his whole life, but every instinct he possessed screamed that handing Lyra over to her father would be a terrible, irreversible mistake. He had saved her from a monster on the battlefield. He would be damned if he delivered her to a different kind of monster in a gilded cage. He made his choice. He turned to the medics, his voice firm despite the fear coiling in his stomach. "We're not surrendering her. Plot a course for the nearest neutral system. Now." The medics stared at him, stunned. But the raw conviction in his eyes was undeniable. On the cot, Lyra closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. A silent thank you to the human boy who had dared to lunge at a beautiful alien woman, completely unaware that her father held the fate of the galaxy in his hands. The dropship, a tiny speck against the vastness of space, broke free of its intended path, veering away from the Council flagship and into the unknown, carrying with it a secret that could either end the war or ignite a far greater one. Finn knew his life as he knew it was over, but for the first time, looking at Lyra's peaceful, trusting face, he felt truly alive. Their journey, fraught with danger and impossible choices, had only just begun. A desperate flight across the stars with the entire Galactic Council as their enemy. The dropship, christened the Sparrow by its pilot, a wiry man named Jax with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, shuddered as it punched through the atmosphere of Viridian 3, a small, rocky world on the fringes of known space. It was a neutral zone, a dusty backwater forgotten by empires and councils alike, its only claim to fame a single, ramshackle spaceport town called Dust Haven. Finn had chosen it because it was the last place anyone would look for the vice president's daughter. They'd spent the last 3 days in the cramped confines of the ship, playing a tense game of cat and mouse with council patrol vessels. Lyra's condition had stabilized, but she remained weak, her violet eyes often distant, lost in thoughts that made her shiver even under the ship's thermal blankets. She told Finn fragments of her story during their flight, how her father, Valerius, wasn't just a politician, but the secret architect of the war between humanity and the Cthar Dominion. He'd been manipulating both sides, stoking the conflict to consolidate his own power within the council, using the chaos as a smokescreen for his own expansionist ambitions. Her presence on the battlefield had been an act of rebellion. She'd been trying to broker a secret peace with a human general when her own father's agents betrayed her, leaving her for dead to frame the humans for her assassination. Now, on the surface, the reality of their situation was even more daunting. Dust Haven was a lawless pit, a haven for smugglers, bounty hunters, and every other brand of galactic scum. The air was thick with the smell of engine grease, cheap synth ale, and desperation. Finn kept his head down, his hand resting near the blaster at his hip, while Jax guided them through the narrow, winding streets. Lyra, wrapped in a heavy, hooded cloak that hid her distinctive purple skin and white hair, clung to Finn's arm, her steps unsteady. Their plan was simple: find a way off-world. They needed credits, a new ship, and a destination far beyond the Council's reach. Jax knew a man, a smuggler named Rourke, no relation, he joked grimly, who might be able to help, for a price they couldn't afford. They found Rourke in a cantina that reeked of stale alcohol and ozone. He was a hulking Brassian with 4 arms and a face like a crumpled paper bag. He listened to their request, his small, beady eyes flicking from Finn to the hooded figure beside him. "A trip off this rock?" he rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "That'll cost you 5,000 credits. Finn's heart sank. They had maybe 200 between them. "We don't have that kind of money," he admitted. Rourke leaned forward, a predatory glint in his eye. "Everyone has something of value, human." His gaze lingered on Lyra. "Your companion. She's Cthar, isn't she? There's a hefty bounty on Cthar officers these days. From the Council itself." Finn's blood ran cold. He stepped in front of Lyra, his hand tightening on his blaster. "She's not for sale." Before Rourke could respond, the cantina doors burst open. A squad of heavily armed soldiers in sleek, silver armor marched in, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors. Council enforcers. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized efficiency, their weapons scanning the room. Their leader, a tall figure with a crimson stripe on his shoulder pauldron, pointed directly at their table. There, the enforcer captain's voice boomed, amplified by his helmet. The fugitives. Chaos erupted. Patrons scrambled for cover as the enforcers opened fire. Blaster bolts sizzled through the air, shattering bottles and scorching the walls. Finn grabbed Lyra's hand and yanked her towards the back exit, Jax covering their retreat with his own pistol. They burst out into a grimy alley, the sounds of the firefight echoing behind them. "Come on!" Jax yelled, leading them through a maze of alleys and over rusted pipes. They could hear the enforcers giving chase, their boots clanging on the metal walkways above. They were trapped, a rat in a maze with a pack of cybernetic cats on their tail. Just as they rounded a corner, a familiar, cultured voice stopped them dead in their tracks. "I must say, Corporal Rourke, your taste in hideouts is rather pedestrian." Standing at the end of the alley, flanked by two more enforcers, was a man who seemed utterly out of place in the grime of Dust Haven. He was tall and slender, dressed in an immaculate white suit that probably cost more than the entire cantina. His skin was a pale lavender, his hair a cascade of white silk, and his violet eyes held a calm, chilling intelligence. It was Valerius, the Galactic Council's vice president, and Lyra's father. Lyra gasped, pulling her hood tighter around her face, her body trembling against Finn's side. Valerius smiled, a thin, humorless expression that didn't reach his eyes. "My dear Lyra," he said, his voice soft and gentle, yet carrying an undeniable threat. "You've caused quite a stir, running away with a common soldier. It's so undignified." "Stay away from her," Finn growled, pushing Lyra behind him, his blaster raised. Valerius chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Put that toy away, boy. You have no idea what you're meddling in." He took a step forward. "Lyra, come home. This little adventure is over. Your defiance ends now." Lyra peeked out from behind Finn, her own fear hardening into a steely resolve. "I won't go back, father. I know what you've done. I know about the war." Valerius's smile vanished, replaced by a cold fury. "You know nothing. You are a child playing with forces you cannot comprehend. That war is the only thing keeping this fragile galaxy from tearing itself apart. My way is the only way to ensure order. It's your order built on lies and blood." Lyra shot back, her voice gaining strength. "I will not be a part of it." Her defiance seemed to enrage him further. He raised a hand, and the two enforcers beside him leveled their weapons at Finn. "Then you leave me no choice. The human dies. He is a corrupting influence." Finn braced himself, ready to make his last stand in this filthy alley. But then, Lyra did something unexpected. She stepped out from behind him, pulling off her hood. She stood tall before her father, her purple skin glowing faintly in the dim light, her white hair flowing around her shoulders. She placed a hand on Finn's chest, right over his heart. "You want to kill him?" she asked, her voice now calm and resonant, filled with a power Finn had never heard before. "Then you will have to kill me too, because my life is his. He saved me on that battlefield, and in doing so he claimed my soul. My fate is tied to his. If he dies, I die." Valerius froze, his eyes wide with genuine shock. He stared at his daughter, at the unwavering conviction in her eyes, at the way her hand seemed to glow where it touched the human's chest. He saw not a rebellious child, but a woman who had found a strength he could not control, a bond he could not break. The political calculation in his mind warred with a flicker of something else, perhaps a long-buried paternal feeling, or simply the realization that killing her here would shatter his carefully constructed facade of benevolent leadership. That he lowered his hand slowly. The enforcers followed suit. "This isn't over, Lyra," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You cannot run forever. The galaxy is my domain." He turned and walked away, his enforcers falling in behind him, leaving Finn and Lyra alone in the alley, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had survived, but their reprieve was temporary. Valerius knew where they were. He would be back with more men, more resources. They were still trapped on this rock, penniless and hunted. As they slumped against the grimy wall, catching their breath, Jax appeared from a side passage, his face pale. "We need to move. Now." There's another way out of here. He led them to a hidden hangar on the outskirts of town. Inside sat a ship, but it wasn't a sleek smuggler's vessel. It was an old, battered Cthar medical frigate. Its hull scarred from battle, but its engines humming with a steady, reliable power. It was abandoned after the last skirmish, Jax explained. Its transponder is fried, which makes it perfect for us. Untraceable. Hope, fragile but real, bloomed in Finn's chest. They had a ship. They had a chance. As they boarded the frigate, Lyra paused at the top of the ramp, looking back at the desolate landscape of Viridian 3. She wasn't just running away anymore. She was running towards something. A future she would build herself, with the human who had dared to lunge at her in the desert, unaware of her station but certain of her worth. Their journey across the stars was far from over, but for the first time, they had the means to write their own destiny, one jump at a time, always looking over their shoulders for the shadow of a father whose love was as vast and terrifying as the galaxy he sought to rule. The old Cthar medical frigate, which Lyra had christened the Dawn Chaser, tore through the inky blackness of space, its engines pushed to their limit. They were running on fumes and hope, charting a course for the one place Valerius's long arm could not reach. The unclaimed expanse, a vast region of space so remote and uncharted that it was considered a myth by most civilized worlds. It was a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. Their journey was a tense vigil. Every sensor ping, every stray comm signal, sent a jolt of fear through the small crew. Finn, Jax, and Lyra took shifts at the helm, their eyes scanning the star charts for any sign of pursuit. In the quiet hours, while Jax slept in the cramped crew quarters, Finn and Lyra would sit together in the dimly lit cockpit, watching the stars streak past. She told him more about her world, about the intricate politics of the Cthar court, and about the crushing weight of being the daughter of a man who saw people as mere pieces on a galactic chessboard. He, in turn, told her about his home on Earth, a small farm on the edge of a great blue ocean, a life of simple joys and honest work that felt like a dream from another lifetime. Their bond, forged in the crucible of the desert battlefield and tempered in the fires of their flight, deepened into something profound. It wasn't just gratitude or a life debt anymore. It was a shared understanding, a mutual respect that blossomed into a quiet, undeniable love. One night, as they drifted through a nebula that painted the cockpit in hues of violet and gold, Lyra reached for his hand. Her touch was no longer a shock, but a comfort, a promise. "If we make it through this, Finn," she whispered, her amethyst eyes reflecting the cosmic light, "I want to build a new life with you, a life of peace." Their sanctuary, however, was an illusion. Valerius was not a man who accepted defeat. He had resources beyond their comprehension. Just as they were about to make the final jump into the unclaimed expanse, a massive shadow blotted out the stars ahead of them. It was the star of Viridia, flanked by a full squadron of Council warships. Their escape route was cut off, the communication channel opened, and Valerius's face appeared on the main view screen. He looked weary, but his eyes burned with a cold, paternal fury. "This is your last chance, Lyra. Stand down. Return to me. I will grant your human friend amnesty. He can live out his days in comfort, far from this conflict." Lyra stood tall, her posture regal, her voice steady. "My place is not with you, Father. It is with him, and our future is not yours to grant or deny." Valerius's expression hardened into stone. "Then you leave me no choice. Prepare to be boarded." Finn's mind raced. They were outgunned, outmanned, and out of options. But then, Jax, who had been monitoring the ship's long-range sensors, let out a low whistle. "Finn, you're not going to believe this." He pointed to a secondary screen. On the edge of their sensor range, emerging from the swirling gases of the nebula, was a fleet. But it wasn't a council fleet. The ships were a patchwork of human and Cthar designs, their hulls battered but their formations tight and disciplined. At their head flew a familiar flag, the personal standard of the human general Lyra had been trying to meet before her betrayal. The general, a grizzled veteran named Eris Thorn, had received Lyra's fragmented peace overtures and, suspecting a trap, had kept his own counsel. When he'd heard reports of the vice president's daughter going missing and the council's frantic search, he'd put the pieces together. He'd gathered a coalition of disillusioned human and Cthar officers who were tired of the pointless bloodshed and were ready to believe there was another way. The battle that followed was short and decisive. The coalition fleet, fighting for a cause they believed in, overwhelmed the council's mercenaries, who were fighting only for a paycheck. The star of Viridia was disabled, its engines crippled, but not destroyed. Valerius was captured, not by his enemies, but by his own people, council members who had finally seen through his web of lies. In the aftermath, aboard the flagship of the new alliance, a formal tribunal was held. The evidence of Valerius's treachery was overwhelming. He was stripped of his title and imprisoned, his grand design for galactic order revealed as a selfish, destructive fantasy. With his fall, the war between humanity and the Cthar Dominion lost its foundation. Peace talks began in earnest, with Lyra, now recognized as the legitimate heir to the Cthar throne, and General Thorn as the primary architects. Years later, the scars of war had begun to heal. On a lush, green world on the border between human and Cthar space, a new city was being built, a symbol of their unity. At its heart stood a simple, beautiful home overlooking a calm sea. Finn Rourke, no longer a corporal but a respected statesman, stood on the porch, watching his children play in the grass. They were a perfect blend of both their parents. Two boys with their father's sandy hair and their mother's violet eyes, and a little girl with a cascade of white hair and a laugh that sounded like music. Lyra joined him, her hand finding his. She was older now, her beauty matured into a serene wisdom, but her eyes still held that same spark of wonder he'd seen in the desert. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did it, my love," she said softly. "We built our peace." Finn looked at his family, at the thriving city in the distance, and then back at the woman who had changed his life forever. He remembered the desperate lunge in the desert, the moment of pure, instinctive courage that had set all of this in motion. He had been unaware of her station, of the galaxy-shaking consequences of his actions. All he had known was that someone needed help, and in helping her he had helped save them all. He squeezed her hand, a silent promise of a lifetime of tomorrows. Their story, born in the chaos of a battlefield, had found its happy ending in the quiet, enduring strength of a love that had defied empires and reshaped a galaxy. The grand hall of the Unity Spire, a gleaming structure built where the fiercest battle of the war had once raged, was filled with light and laughter. Banners of human blue and Cthar violet hung side by side, and guests from 100 worlds mingled in celebration. At the center of it all stood Finn Rourke, dressed not in fatigues but in a finely tailored suit of deep indigo. His posture relaxed, his smile genuine. Beside him, radiant in a gown woven from starlight thread and desert silk, was Lyra. Her purple skin glowed with health, her white hair braided with living blossoms that shimmered with soft bioluminescence. Her violet eyes, once filled with fear and pain, now shone with pure, unguarded joy. Their wedding was more than a union of two people. It was the final seal on a peace that had taken root and flourished across the galaxy. The war was a memory, its lessons etched into the foundations of a new era of cooperation. General Thorn, now the High Chancellor of the Human Alliance, stood as Finn's best man, while a council of Cthar elders, their faces lined with newfound respect, gave Lyra away. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and full of promises not just of love, but of a shared future built on trust and equality. When they exchanged vows, their voices were strong and clear, echoing through the hall and into the hearts of all who witnessed it. There was no grand political speech, only the quiet, powerful truth of two souls choosing each other against all odds. Their home was not in a palace, but on a quiet, sun-drenched world they had chosen together. A place of rolling green hills and gentle seas, far from the intrigues of galactic politics. It was a house of wood and stone and large windows that let in the light, surrounded by a garden Lyra tended with meticulous care. And it was never empty. Their family grew quickly, a joyful chaos of small feet and bright eyes. First came Kalen, a boy with Finn's stubborn jaw and Lyra's sharp, intelligent gaze. Then came Alara, whose white hair was so bright it seemed to catch the sunlight, and who could calm a storm with her quiet empathy. Then came Torin, a whirlwind of energy with his father's courage and his mother's strategic mind, and little Mira, the baby of the family, whose laughter was the sound of pure happiness. Their home was a symphony of life. Toys were scattered across the floors. The air was often filled with the scent of baking bread and alien spices, and the walls echoed with the sounds of playful arguments and loving scolds. Finn, who had once known only the rigid discipline of military life, found a deeper strength in fatherhood, in teaching his sons to fish in the lake behind their house, in reading stories to his daughters under the twin moons, in holding Lyra close at night as they listened to the peaceful sounds of their sleeping children. Lyra, who had been raised in the cold, silent corridors of power, discovered a warmth she'd never known. She traded state functions for school plays, diplomatic briefings for bedtime stories. Her greatest pride wasn't her title as Queen of the Cthar Concordance, which she held with grace and wisdom, but the fact that her children called her Mama with such love in their voices. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching their 4 children chase fireflies in the twilight, Finn took Lyra's hand. He remembered the desperate, dusty lunge in the crimson wastes, the moment he'd thrown himself between her and a monster, completely unaware that the beautiful alien woman before him was the daughter of the most powerful man in the galaxy. He had acted on instinct, on a simple human decency that asked for nothing in return. That he looked at her now, at the love in her eyes, at the life they had built together, at the legacy of peace and family that was their shared creation. He had gotten far more than he'd ever given. Their story, which had begun in the heart of a brutal war, had found its perfect, happy ending not in a throne room, but in the warm, messy, beautiful reality of a home filled with love and the pitter-patter of many small feet. They had their peace, their love, and their family. And for Finn and Lyra, that was everything. Years after that desperate lunge in the desert, Finn and Lyra stood hand in hand on the sunlit porch of their home, watching their children play. Their wedding had united 2 worlds, and their love had healed a galaxy torn by war. They'd chosen peace over power, family over thrones, and built a quiet life far from politics. Their house was always full, first with 4 children, then 6, their laughter echoing through every room. The boys had their father's courage, the girls, their mother's grace. Evenings were for shared meals, starlit stories, and quiet embraces on the porch swing. The ghost of the battlefield faded, replaced by the warmth of a home built on trust. Finn never regretted his reckless act of kindness. It had given him everything. And Lyra, once a lonely princess, now knew the true meaning of belonging. Together, they had found their happy ending, not in grand titles, but in a lifetime of love and a house full of children.